Chapter 4, Graduation. Stardate 7305.15. The clouds meandered back and forth lazily in the sky, as seen through the sky dome overhead. They seemed to be mocking everyone down below, saying, "Look at us so high, we can fly. Look at you down below, you just don't know." That is the way it seemed to Algernon as he sat in his final Psych Talk class. He found it hard to concentrate in the so-called nature room, surrounded by real-looking artificial plants and the sky overhead. The class was 40 minutes into a debate about the nature of the first cause, creator, or, as they used to say, God. A panel of 4 students was on each side. The guest moderator, Don Denshid, sat in between, plugged into the Instructo module. From the anti-creator side, number 1, whose name was O'Reiler, said, "You rely on ancient writings that are subject to interpretation. Besides, they are all myths." Denshid quickly turned to the pro-creator side and asked, "What is your response, Cretes?" A name given to believers in a personal creator. Number 3, "That is your interpretation that they are myths. They are actually based in fact." Number 1, pro side, raised his hand and Denshid motioned for him to speak. Number 1, "It makes good logical sense that a creator who is an intelligent person would reveal himself by means of a written record. It could be preserved for future generations, accurately, of course." Denshid turned with a smirk and said, "What about that, aunties? Could that be true?" Number 1 and number 2 spoke at once. Then the moderator told number 1 to speak first. Number 1, "A book of creation? Come on, that is so narrow-minded. As I have said before, there is evidence for the alpha force. It is much more diversified and capable of the diversification we see in the universe." Number 2 added, "It is much more likely that the Telosians visited this planet about 50 million years ago, and we are their descendants." Number 3 countered, "I say it was the Andromedans. Their DNA is closer to ours. That is what I heard on that This Old Cosmos show." Denshid just sat there and laughed. Number 4 then spoke up with, "We may as well go back to the old theory of a chance collection of molecules in a primordial soup. And, oh yeah, millions of chance accidents later, here we are." A burst of laughter came out of the class. "That may be funny, number 4, but I will have to subtract points for that," Denshid said, red-faced with laughter. One reason why that was so funny to them was that mainstream science had long ago abandoned the theories of spontaneous generation of life from inanimate matter. It was widely accepted that life had an intelligent source. The mystery now was what source and how it guided evolution. Of course, to Denshid and most everyone there, it did not matter what you believed. This was just an exercise for psych class. There was no real search for truth. Truth was just an abstraction, a set of circumstances, an idea to fit your argument. It appeared to Algernon that only 2 of the pro-creator panelists really believed in what they were saying. It was now time for questions from the audience. The first few did not take the subject seriously. Then a thought-provoking question was raised. It caused a silence to fall over the group and change the mood. Algernon looked at the poser of it as she finished asking the pro panel. It was Teresa, a Class 1 student, meaning her grades were in the top 33%. Her question followed this line of reasoning. If the Creator is a person, then we should be like him. Is there evidence that we are in the image of the Creator? Pro number 1 said slowly, "That is an excellent question. Yes, the evidence is in the qualities of a higher nature, such as intelligence, wisdom, justice," he hesitated, "compassion." Then number 1, O'Reiler, jumped at it. "No, there are no godlike qualities, but there is a lot of negative qualities. It shows you make your own image. We control our evolution and our destiny." Even though his response was out of turn, Teresa seemed impressed by it. Denshid chuckled, turned to the pro panel, and with his signature facial expression of being mildly amused, said, "Cretes, do it justice now. Come on." Number 3 spoke up. Yes, right. We can choose which image to imitate, because we are not automatons. We have free will and choose for ourselves to live as a creator purpose. Aldenon had a burning question and had to raise his hand. Denshid pointed to him. If the creator had a purpose, does he still? Is it still valid? A great question, but it will have to be for another debate. Our time is up, concluded Denshid. Both sides let out sighs of relief, which were equally happy. Then the eye module behind Denshid began calling out students' names in its artificial voice. Each student, when his name was called, would take a card from a slot in the machine. This card contained all the student's work for the year, his grades, attendance record, evaluation, and recommendations, everything. The information inside could only be activated or read by the person it was given to, and only after they left the building. As the students were exiting the room, Aldenon noticed Teresa and O'Reilly talking to each other. Aldenon felt attracted to Teresa, but did not know how to approach her. As they neared the door, his eyes met hers. Aldenon nervously blurted out, good question," but was interrupted by O'Reilly knocking the card out of his hand. As Aldenon bent down to pick up his card, O'Reilly pushed him aside and said, "Don't block the door, boy," and they were gone. There was much laughing and talking, some cheering, some crying, posing in photos, and making plans out in the campus courtyards. As the initial excitement settled down, the students were filtered out into various groups for their own parties and celebrations. This was the way the so-called graduation proceeded. It was not a grand ceremony where all are given equal honor. It was merely a termination of the government-mandated education program, where each one can see how high or low he finished. However, some outstanding students and some randomly chosen received certain honors. In their cards, they received an invitation to a special event. Aldenon was now happy because he had received such an invitation. It was for the Excenterlays at the edge of the solar system. Even though this occurred once every few years, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for most people. As Aldenon contemplated seeing this event, all the stresses and disappointments of school began to fade. The invitation said he would only have to pay a fraction of the cost to travel to the site in the far asteroid belt outside of the orbit of Pluto. In simple terms, Aldenon understood the Excenterlays to be an energy release from the asteroids when certain cosmic rays shower the area. The radiation from the rays evidently reacts with the latent energy inside the asteroids and causes them to shoot out fire and sometimes explode. It is quite a spectacular sight to view from the vicinity of Pluto. It has been described as having the mystery and beauty of the auroras, the unpredictability of meteor showers, and the excitement to the eyes of what was once called fireworks, but on a scale 1,000 times greater. Generally, the energy would be blown out in one direction of the asteroid belt, but about 20% of the time it would go in other directions, especially in the case of huge explosions. So a safe zone for viewing was set up prior to the due time of the arrival of the cosmic rays. The 50,000 kilometer minimum distance was as close as anyone could get. Stardate 7305.26. 3 interplanetary cruise ships were in a stationary orbit in the asteroid belt and positioned safely to watch. Each of them had huge observation decks where everyone could watch the space fireworks show from their own seat. Before it actually began, Aldenon observed the posted passenger manifest closely. On it he saw a few names that he recognized. One was Teresa, but she was on one of the other ships. He thought to himself, "What a great time to be able to talk to her." He quickly dismissed the idea since it was obviously impossible. The first energy displays were small and in the direction predicted. Then explosions became more regular, with larger pieces of asteroids flying off. Some of the larger pieces would explode after flying off the main rock. There was no actual sound, but a low thunder with musical tones was added as part of the show on the ships. The entire Excenterlays could last up to 72 hours, with periods of greater or lesser activity. Aldenon, along with most everyone else, was happy with the first few hours of the space fireworks. The dead floating rocks were now coming alive one by one. An invisible artist was now applying his brush strokes for us to see. The rays, perhaps from an exploding star somewhere out there, could not be seen except briefly through dust clouds. There was talk about a rare event that happens at the Excenterlays once in a century. It is when an asteroid, a large one of at least 60 kilometers across, gets thrown out of the orbit of the asteroid belt on a totally new trajectory. That could happen by momentum ejection when the asteroid has increase of energy that is almost evenly covering it, and it is ejected without breaking into pieces. Or an asteroid could be knocked out of orbit by another one hitting it. It had been about 80 years since a major-sized rock had been ejected from the belt. During the 2-day-plus event, Aldenon became friends with Soto Clumax. They roomed together in the same cabin on the ship. Soto was given an invitation to Excenterlays because of his academic achievements. He knew a lot about the asteroids and space science in general. He was tall and thin, wore antique thick glasses, and a little round hat with a feather on the side. No one else wanted to room with him, but Aldenon did not mind at all. He explained to Aldenon the exact process that causes the asteroids to explode. Before the trip, Soto read some journals on O.P. Trogodons. They were a little-known band of space pirates that inhabit some of the outer planetoids in the asteroid belt. They do not live on the surface of them, but deep inside the largest asteroids and planetoids, almost the size of Pluto. From time to time, reports come out of travelers being overtaken and robbed by these pirates. The outer asteroid belt is a vast area that apparently could not be sufficiently guarded by the SSF. Wow, I'm glad we share the same cabin on this trip. You know what is going on out there. Thank you. You are a good listener, Aldenon. You know something? It is not proven, just rumored about the O.P. Trogodons, is that when they are at rest, they look reptilian. But when they run, like to escape, they become orb-like things. So watch for them. I will, Soto. The next day, or more accurately, next viewing period for Aldenon had come. It had been nearly 12 hours into the Excenterlays event. There was no night and day or established show times, so to speak. Everyone set their own viewing and rest times. Aldenon and Soto stayed on the same schedule so they could continue to talk and exchange impressions. One outside recreational activity that was provided this year was the A-Shoot game. It took place in a safe zone asteroid field not far from the 3 cruise ships. The small space rocks were inspected and towed to the playing field, everything being approved as safe. The game involved flying through a simple obstacle course and firing low-power lasers at a specific target. The small EVA pods were outfitted for the game and held 2 players in each one. No special skills or training was needed because everyone was familiar with flying small craft like that. Some of the graduates at the event were much more interested in the recreational things than the asteroid event. So the Excenterlays was more than a fireworks show. It was an event that had several other activities to occupy the young minds there. Only graduates deemed worthy were invited, but also a few average students were given the opportunity. Aldenon considered himself as one of the latter. As Aldenon and Soto were enjoying the space fireworks, Aldenon would occasionally look at the A-Shoot game on one of the view screens. At various points, the screen would show the faces of the players. Aldenon glimpsed one that looked strangely familiar. Then there was an announcement that a replacement player had been chosen for the blue team and to check the information screen. This announcement was made from time to time as players left the game. This way the teams were kept even and more people got an opportunity to play. Aldenon walked over to the game info screen to take a look. He was amazed. It was his name that had been chosen to enter the game. He had about a quarter hour to accept or not. As he stood there looking at his name, still not quite believing it was true, a voice from behind said, "Go ahead, take it. You won't get this chance again." Algernon turned to see Soto behind him smiling. "All right, I will make this event even more memorable. You would play much better than me, Algernon. I will be cheering for you." Algernon got suited up in the prep room. Then, in the EVA pod bay, he entered Blue Pod 26A. In the pod waiting was Jesse, also new to the game. Jesse had first choice of position in the pod. He chose the Manucon seat, which is what most young men would have. That position controls the movements of the pod through space. The remaining position for Algernon was the Syscon seat. The person in this seat monitored all the systems, such as power, weapons, and defense, also very important. They left the pod bay of the cruise ship and took their place in line for the A-shoot game. At first it went slowly as they carefully followed the pod ahead through the obstacle course. Then they came upon the largest rock in the game, which had various targets to shoot at. Then came one with a very wide tunnel to go through, and finally a fast dash across the so-called minefield. All the lasers and explosions could not do any harm, but were just for effect. All of this was closely monitored and controlled by computers and the SSF. All the players, and really everyone invited to the Excenterlays, was carefully chosen. They had to be students of the best behavior and known to have self-discipline. The administrators of the event did not want anyone there who would be a security risk or a problem. Youths who had shown themselves to be without self-control, violent, or confrontational were not invited. Some in society who did not have a clearly defined goal, but more or less drifted along, allowed certain elements such as games or music to control them. These things would take them over and possibly change their personalities for hours, days, or even indefinitely. Because the young could be so easily influenced, all such things became regulated by the government. But of course, there was always secret material made available through clandestine sources, even in this highly scrutinized society. The game was getting a little more exciting now, as Algernon and Jesse were getting better at it. Glimpses of the asteroid fireworks in the distance could be seen at certain points in the game. Algernon could not get out of his mind the thought of the Trogardan pirates Soto told him about. Now they were behind a red team pod. They exchanged fire. It did not have any real effect except to win or lose points. Then from behind came another red pod, flying much faster, passing Aldernon's pod and nearly hitting his teammate's red pod. Aldernon's pod, B-26A, followed this faster red pod long enough to see its number, R7C. As they went through the course again, R7C came from behind again, passing extremely close as they neared the large target rock. R7C shot one target much longer than allowed by the rules to score points. As B-26A neared the target rock, it was Aldernon's turn to shoot, but he could do nothing but stare. The target that R7C shot was no longer there. It was destroyed, leaving just a crater. That scene was shocking to Algernon. It meant that R7C had lasers far more powerful than they should be for the game. As they passed the large rock, they saw other new craters and markers that had been burned or destroyed. They looked as though they had been pounded with a powerful force. The game lasers were not supposed to change or damage the targets at all. What happened back there? I don't know, Jesse, but I'm going to find out who is in R7C. Keep flying. On Aldernon's console, he looked up two names, Galen and Borlier. Algernon got the feeling that something was wrong, so he tuned in the pod cameras to see if the players in that pod matched the pictures. Borlier's face did not match. Who was that? Suddenly Algernon knew. It was O'Reiler. His name was not on the posted passenger list, so he must have assumed the identity of an invitee with a similar sounding name. Aldebaran was putting it together in his mind now. O'Reilly probably paid off Bourlier to get his non-transferable ticket. He was smart enough to circumvent the security gates. He even could have tampered with the lasers. Yes, he was known for such things in the past. The way he was playing the game definitely fit his personality. "Watch out for that R7C, he is cheating," warned Aldebaran. Suddenly a light flashed that everyone could see, no matter what direction they faced. The game came to a stop as they all looked toward the light. It was a huge explosion from one of the larger asteroids. It was unusual, even for the Excenterlays event. Glowing rock missiles raced out in every direction. A few very large pieces started pushing other asteroids out of their place in orbit. This was going to be a threat to the cruise ships because the big rocks were going much farther out than anticipated. Aldebaran saw at least one, maybe two balls of light coming out of the explosion that did not appear to leave a trail. One flew in a wild path toward the ships and then started to disappear. He wondered if anyone else had seen that. The pods were being called back to the cruise ships. Then the emergency alarm sounded in all the ships and pods. One of the ships had gone dark and started to drift. It did not appear to have been hit by a rock from the explosion, but it had obviously lost power, and for some reason it was quickly drifting toward the danger zone. All the SSF in the area immediately went after it to give aid and keep it from drifting into the danger zone of fire. As B-26A was making its way back to the cruise ship, Aldebaran saw another fearful sight. A large piece of asteroid was approaching. It looked as though it would come near to one of the ships, so B-26A decided to wait to see what would happen. Maybe they could give aid or something. Then a laser beam shot up from below. It was purple instead of red in color, and Aldebaran recognized it. Then, as fast as a hornet buzzes you, here came a red pod. Yes, it was as he suspected, R7C. It shot again at the rock, this time hitting on the edge and causing it to roll slightly. He fired again in the center, and it glowed at the spot. Aldebaran and Jesse, now working well as a team, tried to radio R7C. "Do not shoot it. It is an untested rock. We don't know what will happen." "Come on, you nerds. We can have some real fun. Life is a game of chance." Aldebaran knew that voice to be O'Reilly's. The red pod came around again, firing and hitting hard in the center of the rock. The glow in the rock became bright, and it broke apart. It sent several pieces moving relatively slowly in different directions. If the big rock had been left alone, it would have missed the ships. But now the chance of a collision was greatly increased. Even though the ships had defense shields for flying space debris, it was not known if they were working in this unusual emergency. R7C only seemed to be interested in having fun. Aldebaran was closely watching and saw one of the pieces heading straight for one of the ships. B-26A now went after it. The piece of rock was going to hit the observation deck window. "Maybe we can push it with these lasers," Aldebaran said as he set the controls. The beam hit the rock and stayed on for a few seconds. Was it pushing it? It worked. The rock was pushed enough to float past the ship. The group inside cheered as the pod flew past the window. Aldebaran could see some faces, and one was Teresa. Within minutes, the actions of B-26A and R7C were reported to the authorities. An SSF craft returned to each cruise ship. The one that had drifted was returned, power restored. It was announced that the situation was under control and that 2 Trogodon pirates were in custody, their transmuters inoperable. Aldebaran realized that Soto was right. It was a failed attempt by those reptilian pirates to plunder a ship. After viewing security and other visuals, a decision was reached about the actions of B-26A and R7C. B-26A had prevented a possible disaster by pushing the rock away just in time. However, R7C had caused a dangerous situation by shooting and breaking it near the ship. Also, O'Reilly was exposed as fraudulently attending the event and cheating at the A-Shoot game. He was put in detention. Aldenon and Jesse were given a commendation by the captains of all the ships. Chapter 5, Victory Dome. Stardate 7307.24. This is an account of one of the most important events in Aldenon's young life thus far. He and Datar had been close friends since they were very young. Aldenon was now 18 years, terrestrial years, of age. Datar had called him Alden for some time now, as had others. This was no doubt due to verbal express, just to make it more convenient for the tongue. Most of the time it came out sounding like Eldon. Aldenon did not bother to correct people anymore. His name was not that hard to learn, but it was okay with him now, so the name Eldon stayed. The name change was evidently appropriate, because the upcoming important event would mark a turning point in Eldon's life. Datar had invited Eldon to an interplanetary singular source domain, or SS Dome. It was to be held on XT4 Hausa in the Exetar system. Eldon was already familiar with the SS Domes of this group of seekers, or pathfinders. He had been learning from Datar about the history and purpose of the Sing Swords for some time, but this was the first event of this magnitude for Eldon. There were many so-called seekers that traveled the galaxy and beyond to find the great truth, the unity path, or the source of everything. Most of them would not last long in galactic terms. They had their own agendas, preconceived ideas, and methods that inevitably led to disunity and disappointment. However, the Sing Swords were proving to be different to Eldon. So different that to many peoples of the galaxy they were a non-entity, non-existent. It was only a legend of universal proportions. The legend basically said that the Creator, Aya to some, or source of everything we know, existed for uncountable eons before he made a material realm that we live in. Now many do not attribute a name or personality to this Creator, but the Sing Swords do. The so-called legend goes on to tell of a flaw or deviation that was introduced into the material universe by an enemy. This enemy was self-made and allowed to exist for a limited time. This enemy's goal is to divide and conquer the universe, corrupting and effectively ruining this part of the Creator's works. The Sing Swords were raised up to counteract this corruption. They traverse the known universe, bringing the news of singular source domain to all intelligent creatures. By means of this domain or force, which comes directly from the Creator, anyone could gain power to overcome the corrupting influence of that original enemy. No longer would they have to submit to the enemy's domination, causing breakdown and eventual death. There came to be many names for this force, domain, or place. Some of them are still used, such as Forever Place, Timeless World, Utopia, Promised Land, Ten Place, Paradise, Absolute Center, Center of the Wheel of Time, Heaven, Bois Muko Bois, Perfect High, Eternal Bright Day, to name just a few. The Sing Swords took their name from Sing singular, source, D domain. The way Eldon understood it, the Sing Swords only manifested themselves in the SS Domes. They reside in the psyche and live as people until they can transform into entities of power and light. The transformation is supposed to happen when in the SS Domes a collective connection to the singular source domain is made. Then they are able to travel the universe at will to effectively battle with the dark side and maintain good order. Eldon wanted to learn more and find out if they were on their own in that state, or did they carry out assignments as part of a universal army, as it were. This and other questions of his would be answered at this event. Eldon woke early from hypersleep on the vessel to Exetar system. His dreams on such trips were too strange and yet realistic for him to enjoy it. He felt that he was looking into a real world of another dimension, but it was unsettling for him. He slowly rose and walked over to the monitor to see what the actual view outside was like. He said, "View." The image focused into a view of the vessel, then floated past it and into the tunnel ahead. Bright lights and swirls radiated from the center where there was a small black dot. The view of Hyperspeed 7 was as interesting as a monitor test pattern. Eldon stared coldly into the black hole for a few seconds. A faint beep sounded, and then he heard, "Eldon, Eldon, Eldon, wake up." He shook himself out of his stupor, touched the monitor, and saw it was Datar. "Hello, I'm awake now," Eldon answered. "Good, I am coming to see you in a little while. We will be there soon." Shortly, Datar came to Eldon's room. "I'm glad you could come to this SS Domation event, Eldon." "I'm glad I could come, and thank you for taking me in your vessel. There are only 5 of us in this one, but it is better than traveling alone, is it not?" "Definitely." "This SS Domation is historic because we will have more attending from more systems than ever before. Also, there has been more opposition to it than ever. So it is a victory for Sink Swords that we could have it in this place." "There is opposition? Why?" "Yes, Eldon. In the last several Earth solar years, there has been some resistance to our activities by a certain seeker group. They say they want peace, but by their actions, they cause the opposite. What they are really seeking is the twisting and corrupting of everything." "Will we see them at this event?" "We may, but our security is strong. No doubt they will try to disrupt our communications, or even try to get inside the dome, but we will be ready. I remember something in the historical archives when seeker events were stopped or attacked." Datar stood up and paced as he responded. "Yes, those were small beginnings, but fascinating. Way before my time, it was 1.5 Yarick ago, when a prototype of SSD was in its infancy. Back then, religious terms like God, temple, spiritual, or divine were used. It was a time of great ignorance. Then, after the great purge of the 10 systems we knew, those terms were banned." The vessel slowed as they neared Exeter. On the outside view, you could now see individual stars passing by through the translucent hyperspeed tunnel. Eldon continued the conversation. "But there are many seeker groups now." "That's right. It's because the need to find the truth, the source, or supreme being, is still in most intelligent creatures. Only now it is done in a more methodical, scientific way. I'm glad to be alive in this era and not the one before," Eldon said happily. "I am too. Of course, every generation has its challenges and problems to overcome, but we are closer now to the source, the perfect day, if you will, than ever before. The ability we have as a group to tap into the SSD is a breakthrough that no other beings possess that we know of. It is the greatest thing ever since intelligent life has existed. Still, I wonder what life was like for our ancient ancestors when they only knew of 10 systems. There is not much more in the archives than what you saw. Future generations wanted to forget that past. It was much more uncertain back then. People had to be educated from books. They did not have the atomic revelations that we have now." "Yes, Datar, they did not have many things, including the lifespan we have now. But to be honest, I did enjoy looking through those old encyclopedias and saying odd things about the pictures like we did as young kids. I remember that. We looked at the pictures and said quotes or descriptions that did not fit. They were illogical. It used to be called humor back in that day of books, before it was outlawed, publicly anyway. It was good that our parents never caught us doing that, right? My father did not care about that law. He even allowed me to have a blacklisted book. It was called Rainbow Earth." Eldon suddenly got excited, saying, "Oh, how fascinating! I think I've heard of it. Tell me about it." "Imagine another Earth in an alternate universe, or another galaxy maybe. It is similar to our Earth, but different in that it is full of contrasts. It has everything that is against the law in our societies, and it is colorful. That is, our Earth is bland and predictable compared to Rainbow Earth. And, oh yeah, the author said he had actually been there. But most people did not believe that, of course. Datar looked at the monitor and could see Exitar's system coming into view. He wanted to finish, so he picked up the pace of his speaking. So to give you a brief idea of the place, think of contrast. It had all kinds of extremes: heat, cold, beauty, ugliness, rich and poor, war and peace. The majority of people on that planet Earth believed in a creator. They called it God. They had to learn about him from a book for the most part. They had a metaphysical or spiritual side as part of their nature. Eldon broke in with, "It is beginning to sound like our ancient ancestors." Yes, the people of that earth were a lot like our ancestors. They called themselves human. They could not communicate directly with their God. In many ways they were in the dark, in fear and uncertainty. But like the time of our ancestors before the purge, their creator helped the faithful somehow. Datar stopped to ponder. "You know, I read that Rainbow Earth many times, and each time I got something fresh out of it. The people of that world were on their own in many ways. They had to think and make decisions based on little or no knowledge, sometimes just a feeling." "A feeling?" "You know, Eldon, like when something is not balanced inside you, you have a different inclination. But their feelings were called emotions, and they were very subtle. It was different for each person." "Wow! With that kind of rainbow diversity, anything could happen." "That is one of the things about that Earth that is so fascinating, as if it's a real place, is the variety and unpredictable nature of it. Their emotions, or feelings, had a much greater range than ours. They could even imitate qualities of their God. Their God was said to be all-wise, just, or righteous, or loving. I see by your face that you do not understand, so I will try to explain. The quality or trait of justice, for example, is to do what is right, in harmony with the Creator's will. We are beginning to understand and apply this in SSD. Another one is mercy. But love is said to be the greatest. It has more power and is the key to everything. Those two qualities, at least in this space-time, have eluded us. But I believe they are real, and we have the potential to develop them." Eldon shook his head and said, "Could such a place really exist?" "Very possibly, Eldon. The Creator is the one source of everything, no matter how different it may be from what we know. The creation has infinite diversity, as we know for a fact." "I would like to read that Rainbow Earth. Unfortunately, it no longer exists, and it is not in any database that we know of." Just then came an announcement on the comm. "Approaching XT4 Hausa orbital interface. Come to control room at this time." They returned to the small and simple round room once again after their hypersleep. What seemed like a few minutes was an 8-hour flight across 2,000 light years. This was not considered a long distance for one of these events. As they approached, XT4 Hausa looked like many others, but then Eldon noticed the 4 moons. No, not just 4 moons, but 3 smaller moons behind the 4 larger ones, lined up, or rather down, toward the planet. So there appeared to be 16 moons altogether. The planet itself appeared bright white. The entire surface was covered from view by some special atmosphere. Ships from all directions were converging on the planet. They all followed 4 illuminated entry paths to the 4 large moons. When they got near to the moons, a gravity force of some kind took control and brought them in. The ships would just disappear into the large moons. This was possible because they were not really moons, but entry stations or gates. Once inside, they would go through the first phase of entry to the SS Dome. It was an orientation and preliminary information exchange. Eldon had seen this at another SS Dome event, but not to this scale and degree of security. At the end of the first entry phase or moon gate, your transport, whatever kind of ship, would be parked, as it were, after receiving your pass or ticket. Then each attendee would be placed in a trans shell, a sort of bubble, to move them along to the next moon gate. Progress to the second, third, and fourth moon gates proceeds rapidly for most attendees. Inside each of these are a series of scans and preparations to enter the SS Dome. Each attendee's body must be prepared from a molecular level. This is because the SS Dome has its own space or dimension. It has become more commonly known as SSS, Singular Source Space, or 3S. The appearance on the outside is that the attendees of the event disappear for a few solar days. What really happens is that these ones that enter SS Dome are transformed to the SSD space, which is really invisible to those in regular space. In the process, they become very small in regular space, so small that the entire SS Dome is contained inside a space of a small room inside the planet. Time is slowed or nearly stopped for the insiders, which makes it seem that the time is speeded up on the outside. This time effect seems contrary to the physical universe, in which larger things measure time in greater spans, smaller things in smaller increments. A galaxy may take many billions of years to rotate if counted in solar years. Nuclear reactions in the atoms of a star happen millions of times in a second, so this slowing of time inside the SS Dome is unique. It is a proof of being at or near the source, the creator, if you will. All this is made known to the entrance through the moon gates. No harm is ever done to the entrance into the SS Dome. The process was enacted by Sing Sword Lords exactly according to instructions as received from an SSD directive. In fact, physical health actually improves during the event. Diseases are cured, old wounds healed, and the body and mind are made sound. However, these are just the side benefits when you consider the experience as a whole. Reaching the fourth moon gate, Eldon, along with the others, was pre-compressed and ready to be inserted into the SS Dome. It was somewhat like traveling down to the deepest depths of the ocean. Descent must be gradual to adjust to the extreme pressures. In the fourth gate, as Eldon was waiting in line to be fired into the dome, he could see what was not visible before. Orbiting the host planet were satellites of some kind. They looked like blobs of translucent energy, white and faintly gleaming. Their orbits intersected directly in front of the moon gate. When two of these bright blobs met at the same time, at that point, a black hole would appear for a split second. It was exactly then that an entrant was fired into the dome by the fourth gate's insertion cannon. Now it was Eldon's turn. He saw the two bright blobs approaching. They met. The black hole. Eldon was fired. The next thing Eldon experienced was hearing music that was soft and beautiful. Then a grand chorus grew from a distant sound to a nearer place. And with the sound of the chorus, a faint light appeared. It got larger until it was a galaxy clearly in view. Eldon somehow knew it was the galaxy he lived in. Then he became aware of many other things. No one had told him, but he now knew the names of everyone present. There must have been hundreds of thousands. He looked to his side, and Datar was there next to him. They were suspended, weightless, apparently against the back of a spherical room. It was very hard to tell how large the room was. The galaxy was in the center. It was real, not just a projection of some kind. That is the way it seemed to Eldon. He now realized that he was experiencing, at least partially, the so-called atomic revelation that Datar had told him about earlier. It was unique to the SS Domes. This way of imparting information went far beyond the normal physical senses. It was as if every part of the body taking in messages on an atomic level. Your plane of consciousness was expanded so much that it was another form of existence. You no longer were small and alone, but part of a grand living organism, not just an organization. In this state, you could not only hear each other's thoughts, but feel, as it were, the beat or rhythm of the universe. Mere words cannot fully describe the SSD experience. It may be compared to a man who has been blind all his life, and now he sees the most beautiful art that he has a part in creating. Or if you can imagine a person born deaf, now hears the most wonderful music that he himself is making. You have the idea. The agenda of this historic SS Dome proceeded now. There was news of 1,000+ acts or deeds of the Sing Swords throughout the known universe. These ranged from the rescue of a small animal to the latest event in the Great War against Zeuton, an empire in opposition to the natural order of things. Gradually, more and more of the Sing Swords present received their assignments. These were only given to the seasoned members, those with some experience and electade or skill. As a few examples, Aspirine 29 was sent to Beta Epsilon 6 to help a young Cypresta Academy student to make a good decision regarding his future course. Milton Sec 144 was instrumental in negotiations to end the Trenebulan fighting in the Centarmeg 1 region of the galaxy, and Emrys Diana 7 was sent to prevent the captain of a rescue vessel in Andromeda A0071 from being seduced by a shape-shifting Victoridian bent on causing havoc. Another example at this event that I learned about from Datar was outstanding. I will try to tell it as briefly and simply as I can. This happened on Earth, our own home planet. When Michael Lazarus III was sent there to Russia to protect an innocent person, he encountered an unexpected problem. The person he was sent to protect had reported a crime to police the day before. He was able to give a good description of the perpetrator to police. Now the perpetrator of the vile crime was following this person with the intent of killing him. The innocent law-abiding reporter of the crime was now aware that he was being followed by the criminal. He invoked a higher power by saying out loud, "In the name of all that is right, God help me." This person, James T., and his plea was somewhat unusual even for Earth of this timeline. It caught the attention of the higher power that makes the assignments for the Sing Swords. Because of the SS Dome, an agent could be dispatched instantaneously to the place needed. This agent, Michael Lazarus III, was now approaching the criminal from behind. He saw the man pull a gun-like weapon from his pocket and start to point it forward. But before Michael could jump on the criminal, the man quickly turned around and fired on Michael. The forward motion of Michael caused him to fall into the criminal, knocking him down. Then, as he tried to get up, Michael realized he had been shot with no ordinary gun. Mere projectile weapons could not stop the Sing Sword agents because of their molecular structure. With this one, Michael was taken by surprise, and it was very painful, slowly draining the life out of him. At the same time, an energy field was building around the both of them. This was obviously engineered to take down a Sing Sword, and it was this imposter criminal's plan all along. As they struggled against each other, the field around them became stronger. They could not break free from it. They became locked in combat, with Michael growing weaker and the other, a suspected Zeutonian, growing stronger. The bullet or cylinder in Michael's chest was a phase-shifted leech probe. It was sucking not only the life from him, but all information, including the formula or code for entering the SS Dome. It was impossible even for the Sing Swords to bring Lazarus III back to the SS Dome while they were locked together in the energy field. If his attacker wins out and finds a way to enter the dome, it could jeopardize other lives and be disastrous. The Sing Sword Lords had no choice but to break their link with Michael Lazarus III, since it could be used by the enemy to infiltrate the SS Dome. Although rare, this was a risk that all Sing Swords were willing to take. As powerful as they are, they could still lose their lives because the enemy is very powerful. So with Lazarus III cut off from the SS Dome, the attacker could do nothing more. James T. had fled. He did not know what had happened, but he was thankful to be out of danger. At the end of the SS Dome event,
Eldon felt as the rest did, elated, fulfilled, and victorious. This life-changing event meant more to him than any previous one. About 2 weeks had passed in solar time, but inside the dome it seemed like only hours. In general, the Sing Swords and their companions considered the passage of time a small sacrifice for their grand event. As they left the orbit of XT4 Hausa, Datar asked Eldon, "How do you feel now, Eldon?" Eldon smiled, looking at the planet as it faded, and said, "I think you know. It is hard to put into words, but I'm awed and humbled. It's like I have a new direction." "That is good. You are level 1 and are on your way. Continue your quest for the source of light and truth." Eldon had found the greatest purpose in life. Nothing he had known could compare to seeking the singular source of everything. What higher or better course could be pursued by intelligent creatures of all kinds? He was thrilled that he could have a part in making this opportunity available to others. Life was no longer just a possibly 300-year, much less for many, existence. Yes, the current lifespan of 250 to 300 years on Earth was pitifully short. When the capacity of the average Earthling brain is at least 10,000 times what could be learned in 300 solar years, and the universe, the infinite creation out there beckons to be explored. However, it was not just the possibility of endless life that the SS Dome offered. It was a new dimension and a higher quality of life that also intrigued Eldon. The new purpose the Sing Swords discovered and embraced involved a relationship with the Almighty Creator. This was unprecedented in Eldon's and many others' experience. Such an idea was the stuff of fantasy in Eldon's Earth. In a world where logic, proving by sight, and learning by rote ruled the day, coming to know a personal Creator was a giant leap of faith. And faith itself was a new concept. But it was catching on and making changes for the better throughout the galaxy, thanks to the service of the Sing Swords. As Eldon contemplated these things on the way home, he could not help but think of what Datar had told him about the Rainbow Earth. In that world, about 90% of the population believes in a creator or God, and yet there is injustice, suffering, violence, and even wars on a global scale. He wondered how great beauty could exist there amid widespread poverty and ugliness. True knowledge and light was available to all, yet they lived in darkness. Why was there so much hatred when they had the capacity to show love and other advanced traits? Yes, Eldon remembered that Datar had told him the book said they were born with the ability to display their Creator's highly advanced traits if trained to do so. They could even communicate with the Creator in a personal way. No special equipment, place, or ceremony was needed for them to do this. That thought really fascinated Eldon. Their Creator cared so much for them that he made himself readily available to them. They no doubt needed this arrangement to endure such a world of uncertainty and suffering. Those people did not live very long because of diseases and so many maladies. Why did their Creator, who cared so much for them, allow them to live like that and die so soon? Eldon wondered about that rainbow Earth of such contradictions and such possibilities. That Earth would be a very unique place in the universe. Those so-called humans would be special, unlike any other intelligent life forms. Could such a place really exist? Eldon thought so. And then he thought, it must be the same source or Creator that I am coming to know that the people of Rainbow Earth pray to. It all came from the one source. Eldon knew if that was true, then the very benevolent Creator would send help to correct the situation there.